Are we good to go?
All right, let me double check. I think we're live, but let's go ahead and double check that before we get started.
I see it.
So it looks like we are live on the Mountville Archaeological Park's Facebook page for the virtual Moundville Native American Festival for 2020. So we are going to be talking to Dr. Kent Reilly. So Alex, would you like to introduce us?
Sure. To all our viewers, hello and welcome to the virtual Mountville Native American Festival. My name is Alex Benitez. I'm the director at Mountville Archaeological Park. Today we have some really important special guests. Down on my screen is Dr. Kent Reilly from Texas State University. We have Dr. Bill Bomar from UA Museums, our executive director. We also have Lindsay Gordon, our education outreach coordinator, and also the festival director, so responsible for helping us put all of this together. And then also Rebecca Johnson, who is our UA Museum's communications coordinator. And both of you have done a wonderful job so far. This is an exciting session. I'm excited to have this discussion with Bill and Kent. And before I tell you what we're talking about here, I also want to thank our important sponsors who make our festival possible every year. We've got Moundville Telephone Company, EBSCO, and of course the Alabama Bicentennial Commission, who has supported our festival for the last couple of years. We greatly appreciate their contributions. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about Mississippian archaeology, but we're also going to talk about museum exhibits. And there are two important museum exhibits that we're going to have a really interesting discussion about. One is our own Jones Archaeological Museum, which was renovated back in 2010. It's a great facility for those of you who haven't visited. It's a great reason to visit the park other than our wonderful mounds. But we also have an important exhibit coming nearby to the Birmingham Museum of Art next year. And that was curated by Dr. Kent Reilly, who was also involved in our exhibit here at Moundville. But, two important Mississippian cultures at Moundville and Spiro, and a little bit about how we develop these exhibits and how, museum exhibits work in general. And then with that, I will turn it over to maybe Dr. Bill Bomar. We're first going to talk a little bit about the Mountville Museum, which for those of you who don't know, Bill was the director of Mountville Archaeological Park for something like 16 years, Bill, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Instrumental in spearheading the effort to renovate the old museum and turn it into what all of us believe is a world-class museum. It's a fantastic facility. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we went ahead and developed that. So let me go ahead and pull up our PowerPoint here, and we'll go ahead and have Bill talk a little bit about.
Okay. So I had the great privilege of being the director of Mountville Archaeological Park during the time that we renovated the Jones Museum and developed new exhibits there. And Dr. Reilly, who is speaking tonight, was an integral part of that, of our team. It was a team effort, and we had a fantastic team. And Dr. Reilly was our guest curator, so he advised us on content and really shaped what you see there now. And we're really just so thankful to have the technology to be able to present a virtual Moundville Festival. But I encourage all of you to visit the Jones Museum and visit Moundville Park and see the exhibits there. Moundville's a fantastic site. 800 years ago, it was America's largest city north of Mexico. And the exhibits in the museum before we renovated them really did not do the site or the Moundville people justice. The exhibits were antiquated. They had not been changed since the 1970s. And so we developed, we brought together a team that included some really fantastic Native American representatives from some of the Southeastern tribes, along with exhibit designers and scholars like Dr. Reilly, Dr. Jim Knight, Dr. Vin Stepanidis, and others who work together to develop the exhibits that you see in the park now. So when we gathered our team, we had two main goals, and that was one, to bring the ancient Moundville culture and the Moundville people to life, to really create an immersive environment that makes visitors feel like they are in the middle of another culture at another time. And, you know, so I'll just mention, I'll talk about that for just a second. That is something that is, you know, that since we're talking about the process of developing exhibits, immersive theming and creating immersive exhibits, you know, it's really been done for a few decades now. You know, the Field Museum back in the 70s was creating Egyptian exhibits that made you feel like you were going into a tomb. But unfortunately, museums that told the story of past Native Americans had really fallen behind in that. And so we really had the opportunity to set some new standards for how you can interpret prehistoric Native American peoples. So you see the slide there shows the Jones Museum that was finished in 1939, and really reflects the architecture of archaeological museums at the time. It's very tomb-like. The building itself really created to give you the feeling of going into a tomb. The problem with that is it creates the feeling that you are that you're experiencing a dead culture, and the culture of Southeastern Native Americans is anything but dead, as you can see if you participate in our festival. So we really wanted to bring it to life on the inside, and we worked to do that. Go ahead, Alex. This was an exciting day because it meant the project finally started. It was a $5 million project, and it took a long time to raise that much money from some very generous supporters. But you know, the demolition of the old gift shop behind the building that had been added in the 60s was a landmark day. Go ahead. And then construction began and started to move pretty quickly. There is an addition on the back of the building. The exhibits mainly occupy the original building, and the addition created space for a retail area, a coffee shop, and then really very importantly, a viewing area where visitors can sit and look out at the site after they've been through the exhibits. Go ahead. It was a complete gutting of the building. So it was all the way back to the bare bones of the building. A lot of multimedia and technology was employed, sound effects. And so all of that had to be done, you know, behind the walls, behind the scenes. Go ahead. Our exhibit designers worked with us to create things like curved walls that sort of made you forget, once the murals were applied, that you were in a museum space, and made you feel like you were more in a cultural space. And that goes all the way, you know, to the construction. Go ahead. Okay, a very important part of our project, because we created, as you're going to see in a minute, because we created an exhibit that was immersive with life-size dioramas, it was important to create these scenes with props made by Native Americans. And we devoted a significant amount of the budget to hiring Native American artists to produce these things. Jay McGirt, who you see here, who's now passed away, unfortunately, Jay McGirt was a fantastic artist. His work has been exhibited in the Smithsonian, and we brought him to Moundville to live at the park for 6 months as an artist in residence. And here he is stitching together literally thousands and thousands of feathers for a canopy that you're going to see in a little while. Go ahead. We also, to create these human figures that were so lifelike, we brought on Native Americans to serve as models, and they had to have their faces molded for each of the characters in our scenes. And I believe this is Micah Swimmer, who's a Cherokee. The Native Americans that we selected all came to Moundville. That's in our maintenance shop, to have their faces molded by a company from New York. Those folks there came in for it. Go ahead. And you can see these molds were made of their faces. The one on the left, the plaster cast there, is actually of Jay McGirt, who we just mentioned. He also served as the chief model. Go ahead. Meanwhile, the exhibits were being fabricated based on the designs we had come up with in Seattle, Washington. The company Pacific Studio had won the bid. And so we had to check on the progress. This is on one of those site visits that I made. And Doris Woodward, one of the exhibit designers, is in that photograph. And Kent Reilly joined us, I think, remotely. We brought him in on video feed for some of that. Go ahead. And there's Jeff Woodward, our other designer, creating or looking at some of the creations of Pacific Studio. Go ahead. And the murals being painted. Go ahead. You can keep going. There's the Earth Lodge that is a prominent feature in the exhibit before it's all painted up, and it serves as the set for a multimedia show. Go ahead. Some of the prop pottery. So we had Native Americans produce all of the reproductions like pottery that are in the dioramas, in the recreated scenes, but some of the hands-on material that was going to, that is in places where the public can touch it, had to be much more durable. And so it was produced by the exhibit people. Go ahead. And then the exciting day came where the crew from Seattle came with 3 tractor trailers full of their creations and started installing in the Jones Museum. This is on site. Go ahead. Some of the fantastic raptor creatures that are featured prominently in the exhibits. Go ahead. The Earth Lodge. Go ahead. To create the look of being inside a chief's house, woven cane matting was used on the walls. Go ahead. Artifact cases being installed. Go ahead. And then the rest of these pictures we'll go quickly through, show the finished product. We have these heraldic posts leading up to the museum, creating this feeling that you are walking into something, and this is what you're walking into, this fantastic scene of a group arriving on the Moundville Plaza. You can see those raptor creatures up above. I mentioned the Native American involvement. Besides, just creating the props and serving as models, the Native American advisors were instrumental. And I think that Dr. Reilly is probably going to talk about how they have been helpful with the exhibit development for the Spyro exhibit. But here's an example. Those raptor creatures up there on the ceiling, that completely came out of a recommendation from our Native American advisors. We had in mind this event going on the Moundville Plaza that we depict there. And our advisor said such an important event would be accompanied by what you call, what anthropologists call supernatural creatures. To them, they are real creatures, but these are the thunders, these creatures associated with north, south, east, and west, upper world creatures that would ensure that an event like this would happen orderly. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. You can see the great realism of the figures. These are not like, in the old exhibit days when department store mannequin kind of things were used. This is actually, these are life casts. They were taken from living people, and each model was like an actor. We described to them what feelings they were feeling, and each one played a different part, and they had to hold their face steady while they felt that emotion, and then the casts were made. Go ahead. Go ahead. There's the chief and his family. Go ahead. Some of the artifacts on exhibit, you can just keep going. The famous Moundville duck bowl is beautiful. Go ahead. Stone pallets. Go ahead. And there's a view showing the central exhibit hall. Go ahead. This wing of the museum really explores the Moundville outer world, the spiritual outer world and the physical outer world, the world beyond the comforts of the Moundville Palisade. Go ahead. And it's a more mystical scene because that really relates to the topic of Moundville being a necropolis, a city of the dead, a place where people wanted to be buried when they died, even after the Moundville site was abandoned, so that they could enter the afterlife from the Moundville site. Go ahead. Our multimedia show with the shaman there. Go ahead. The Moundville retail store, it's an important part of the visitor experience, you know, not just as a source of revenue for the park, which goes to a good cause, but also to really share the work of native artists, you know, handmade objects and things like that. Go ahead.
Including some folks whose work is on exhibit, right? Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Dan Townsend, shell work we often have in the museum store. Today, Tamara Bean spoke at the Moundville Festival, and we regularly carry some of her things. And you can see behind the museum, we created this fantastic deck with a viewing area, because, you know, no matter how wonderful our exhibits end up, the real star of the Moundville show are these ancient monuments, the mounds themselves. And so we really like that visitors can go through the exhibits and then come out and see the site again and see it maybe with new eyes and be able to imagine what it was like there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think
okay, so that's just a quick overview of what we did at Moundville. And as I mentioned, Dr. Reilly was our guest curator and was an integral part of the entire process. And right now, Dr. Reilly is very involved in the production of this new exhibit that he'll tell you more about on the Spiro site, the Spiro culture, which is also a Mississippian Native American site in Oklahoma. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Reilly.
Thank you, Bill.
And if I could say real quick that these are two of the most important Mississippian archaeological sites that we know of, and so it's amazing to sort of contrast, you know, we consider sort of a permanent exhibit, and then, you know, look at how you put together a really complex, you know, almost a blockbuster, you know, kind of exhibit in terms of its you know, diversity of objects and expanse, and, you know, how it's going to really move around the country.
Yeah, and I'll mention the Moundville site is so well known as being so large, and the mounds themselves, it's the second largest mound site in what's now the United States. The Spiro site is known for some incredible artwork to have come out of there. So go ahead, Kent.
All right, getting there to the beginning. Good afternoon, everyone.
We don't see your screen, Kent, if you want to share your PowerPoint.
But I hit share. Let's see here.
Still don't see it.
Well, while he does that, I think, you know, the other interesting contrast in the two exhibits is that, you know, Moundville we consider one of the most, you know, best preserved archaeological sites, Mississippian sites. And it certainly is. And you know, the history behind Spiro is unique, but it's probably one of the least best preserved in one sense, the site itself. But the riches, as you mentioned, it's produced are just incomparable. It really, I think it's been called a King Tut's tomb in America, I think was a headline of one of the papers. And it's also a subheading to a book that was written on that period. But it's really an interesting contrast in producing exhibits from really different kinds of contexts as well, in terms of where the objects come from. We have some materials that were taken from Moundville, but a lot of those were grouped. And I think this exhibit that Kent will talk about really is pulling together, you know, things that were so widely dispersed. And I'm excited to.
Excuse me, folks. Yeah. I have a message that comes up, screen sharing has failed to start. Please try again later.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Well, it sounds like it's not user error. Rebecca, do you have any tips for Dr. Reilly?
The only thing I can think of is if he left the Zoom meeting and tried to come back in, we could try that and see if that'll work.
Okay.
But other than
I'll
that,
give that a try.
I've never heard of that error before, but if you want to try to go out and come back in, we can do that.
Well, I found my share and it says screen sharing has failed to start. Please try again later. And I'm clicking OK, and then I'm going to get out of all this.
Okay. And we'll just say to our audience, you know, this is live TV and anything can happen. And so,
exactly.
So bear with us. And Alex, you want to do a little song and dance?
Well, okay. For the third time today, I will do a different one. Let me get some props together.
Okay, Dr. Reilly.
I ask for a raise after this one, Bill. We'll break out some 80s moves that y'all may not be.
Well, I have a question about the exhibits. Before, I know you had a lot of Native American input and stuff. So were there a lot of students and stuff involved with the building of exhibit? How much student involvement did you have, or university involvement did you have?
Yeah, we didn't have our museum studies program formed at that point, and we really didn't have much student involvement. We would certainly now, because we now at the University of Alabama for the last 4 years, we've had a graduate museum studies certificate program, and we have a very dedicated group of students who would have loved to have that opportunity. I will say that a lot of our information presented in the exhibits came from recent research at Moundville. And a lot of that research students played an integral role in. There have been several dozen master's theses and doctoral dissertations written by University of Alabama anthropology students on Moundville. And so a lot of that research that really could not have been completed without student involvement played a key role in the development of the exhibits.
Yeah, I've been impressed since I arrived here how much research has been done by our own students over the years. It really is impressive, and they've all gone on to professorships at other universities. But really, a lot of people have contributed to the story that we tell in the museum. But there's certainly also a lot of other stories we could continue to tell with the information that's been excavated. And I should say too that we Moundville is still a research site in one sense. We do encourage students to come here and ask new questions about this history. And it's been amazing to see how much has been done over the last, what would you say, 70 years, since the park was established, maybe the 30s or even 20s.
Yeah, especially in the last couple of decades. The University of Alabama about 15 to 20 years ago got a doctoral program in anthropology that really increased the level of research activity. Kent, we saw your face momentarily and it was frozen, and now we can't see. It's
all
working.
Right.
Screen sharing. Dr. Reilly, can you say something so we can see if we have your audio?
Hello, everybody.
All right, we hear you.
We don't have your video, so if you can start video, see if you can do that.
Yes, launch meeting, when system dialogue prompt, open link, already done that, all of it. Okay.
Yeah, now you need to open your PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And also, so that we see you down in the corner, you'll need to start video.
All right.
There we see your PowerPoint.
Okay.
There we go.
Now, where is the, oh, shoot. What else do I need to punch?
If you can hit, do you see anything that says start video?
Well, it's not a start video, it's just me clicking.
It should be in your Zoom window.
In the window where you can see faces.
Oh, that's, I'm.
Looks like we've got the PowerPoint ready to go. It's shared the screen. We just
That's me, but you're not going to be able to see me, I guess. Why don't I just start? Okay, because there's no start video here.
Okay, all right. Let me see if this will work with what we got.
Okay, well, what I was going to talk about today, in terms of talking about Moundville as a great museum center, is to talk about an exhibition that will be coming to the area. It'll be coming to Birmingham. And this exhibition is actually put together in the state of Oklahoma. It's called Recovering Ancient Spiro, Native American Art, Ritual, and Cosmic Renewal. Okay. And it will open on February the 7th, 2021. It will then go to Birmingham, and then it'll go to Dallas, Texas. Okay. Now, any art exhibition falls really into two categories. First, they're masterpiece shows, such as this one. I just picked one I had on the shelf, Rembrandt, the late works. Well, there's no denying that Rembrandt was a master. So we've got these masterpiece works. And then an exhibition can be designed to present a new paradigm through new interpretations of existing works of art. Okay. And for Recovering Ancient Spiro, our goal is going to be twofold. We're going to showcase masterpieces as well as present major new interpretations, emphasizing the creativity and intellectual depth of Caddoan people. Because Spiro, which is right here, Moundville, which is over here, this is the area where Caddoan Native Americans function. And for those of you who are interested, the Caddoan peoples of today, along with the Wichita, are greatly committed to this exhibition. Now, Spiro is right here, just a few miles on the Arkansas from here in Oklahoma, from Arkansas itself. And we can say that Mississippian culture probably ran all the way out here to the Harlan site. That's about as far west as it's going to make it. Now, this is the major mound. Spiro bears no resemblance really to the beautiful complexity of Moundville. Moundville is my first love. But it does have some interesting mound work, and particularly the Craig Mound. Okay. Now, everything you see may look authentic, but it's not. During the WPA, they took it all down to the ground. Okay, we would never do that today. And they rebuilt it afterwards. Now, the site was discovered and actually looted during the Great Depression. Okay. The communities around Moundville are rural and very much resemble rural communities here in Alabama. Okay. And as it was said, 1922, King Tut. 1932, we get the Spiro site, which was called in the Kansas City Star a King Tut's tomb in the Arkansas Valley. Now, relic miners or looters actually had themselves put together as a corporation. They were called the Pupa Mining Company. And they dug into the highest point in the Craig Mound, and they found a central chamber. As far as I know, this is the only mound in amongst the Mississippians where there was a hollow chamber. Hollow chamber was 16 feet tall and 16 feet wide. It was later, once that information got to the Oklahoma legislature, they said, no, we're not going to let people loot our artifacts and the artifacts of the Native Americans. So they passed a law that said the Pupa miners had to leave, and they petitioned the WPA to come in and start excavating. Unfortunately, the Pupa miners put several kegs of dynamite in the central chamber and blew it up. Now, Moundville has 22 surviving mounds, as Alex showed you a little earlier, we've only got 5 at Spiro, and none of them are anything like the height of the Mound A or B. But what Moundville and Spiro have in common is our earth lodges are hollow chambers. We've got one out here on, this is Mound V. Dr. Knight excavated that about a decade ago. Wasn't it a decade ago, Alex?
Maybe 2.
2?
Or more.
I don't think it's that long.
It was about 14 or 15 years ago.
Okay.
Okay. Here's the Craig Mound. This is the first known photograph of it. Snow time. And this, do you see this little barn with a mule?
Yes.
Hey, the mule was named Constancia. And there's a mystery that goes on amongst the peoples who live in the area. They say every Halloween, the mound opens up and a wagon comes out pulled by black cats. And somehow that's related to our friend right here. Now here's a cross section of the Craig Mound, and there's the hollow chamber. Number 16 by 16, give you some sense of depth and height. My co-curator, Eric Singleton, has been working very hard trying to get these early pictures together. Now, we have 2 great art styles at the Spiro site. One is the Braden style, which is probably imported material for the central Mississippi Valley, and the Craig style, which is almost certainly Caddoan, and it was produced in the area immediately surrounding the Craig Mound. Now, the site was inhabited from about 900, but what we're really interested in is this time of greatest complexity, okay? This is when the great mortuary and the hollow chamber, which we also refer to as a spirit lodge, was constructed. And that was about 1400, which is later than Moundville.
So Kent, I have a question there.
Yes.
Okay, so that time, the timing of that, around 1400, that's very close to the time that Moundville had been mostly abandoned and had become a necropolis with intensive religious activity, presumably, where people were bringing their dead to be buried. So do we see across the Mississippian world a heightened activity, heightened religious activity at this time period?
Well, what's going on here at Spiro, not Moundville, but at Spiro, is the new paradigm. It's a period of tremendous drought. It's the same period in which the great pueblos in Chaco Canyon and in the cliff dwellings were constructed. And because of this drought, all these sites were abandoned and people moved to the Rio Grande in New Mexico. We believe, and in the catalog we'll deal with this, we think that what happened was that things were so bad that the drought lasted over a decade. And if you think about how much surplus they would have had, maybe 2 years, not any decade, that the people at Spiro and probably other people in the area decided this is just dreadful. We need to start the world over again. And the central chamber is actually a spiritual location where, as I'll show you, they started to remake the world. Now, that's not what you've got at Moundville. It's something separate. Answer your question?
Yeah, fascinating.
Okay, now, most of the artifacts from the Spirit Lodge were looted. In fact, arrow points were being sold for a dime a dozen on the highway. Okay, One of the things this exhibition is trying to do is to get for the first time as many artifacts as possible back together. Such as this. Now this, I'm gonna have to do my little hand signal. This great raptor bird, remember Bill pointed out the raptors that surround the bride in the Moundville exhibition. This is this big. It's a pipe this big. Made from stone. Was once covered in copper. Do you see the copper right here?
Yes.
Okay. And he is, with great gusto, pecking out the brains of a human being. This is a human skull. And he probably represents the great raptor that sits on the Milky Way. That if you couldn't answer questions correctly, he would make short shrift of you. Now, I'm just showing you some of the artifacts. This is the actual size of this blade. It's from kaolin flint. It's from the Spirit Lodge. And I think everyone would admit that's one beautiful piece of stonework. This is what I mean by looted. Look at that number of projectile points, okay? And this was taken out and was put on the road to sell. None of these were ever used. They're all for ceremonial purposes. Now, this is one of the fine things that'll be in the exhibition. It's a crystal effigy pupa. This also relates, Spyro, to Moundville. As you know, we have a creature at Moundville that I named Mothra, okay, that's on the Willoughby disc. Okay? And this is the pupa, okay, of that giant sphinx moth that we displayed in several areas in Moundville. We also, unfortunately, we didn't have Jay to do it, but we're reconstructing several of the feathered cloaks that were found in the Spirit Lodge, okay? When an archaeologist got out to the site, he came down from the University of Oklahoma. Several of the children of the Pecola miners were running around with these capes draped over their shoulders, and they were falling apart.
Wow.
Makes you want to weep. We have a great deal of preserved cloth and enough to say that we can reconstruct one of the spirit dancers there.
Yeah, Kent, let me just interject here. You're showing fragments of material that that usually doesn't survive. But we know from the images like the one on the right, which were, have been taken from artifacts, that the Mississippian people, their regalia was quite spectacular and included lots of items that don't survive archaeologically. And so, I just want to point out to our audience that these fragments provide just a little glimpse into the fantastic textile work, for example, that these people produced.
Now we get these things preserved at Spyro because they were in the Spirit Lodge, which is a hollow chamber. So they were preserved from decay. As far as I know, we don't have anything like that from Moundville.
We do not.
This is one of the Pecola miners' photographs. You can see they've got things lined up for the photographs and they will be offered for sale. Okay. Now I want you to look carefully. Do you see this, what appears to be a string of beads?
Yes.
Those are pearls. They're pearls. These are pearls. and these are pearls, but these are beads over here, shell beads. Okay. We have got one pearl that will be shown in the exhibition, which is 1.5 inches in length.
Wow.
Eat your heart out, Lindsay.
And tell us about those, the numbered items there, the maces.
These, yes, this is trying to get a count on how many actual objects came out of the Spirit Lodge. Alex knows, because he was at the Smithsonian, how many pieces they have stored in the Museum of the American Indian. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to point out too, when you're talking about, looting the site, thankfully, there were a lot of museums that managed to preserve these objects and acquire them either from the Pecola Mining Company or other private collectors. But a lot of these have ended up in museums scattered across the country, which is why this exhibit is so incredible, is that it's, like you said, it's pulling them all together. But, a lot of these pieces are preserved because they are in museum collections, and who knows how much was lost out there to private collectors, or the $10 purchase on the side of the road. But it also just blows your mind how much was in this 16 by 16 foot space when you think about how much is out there.
Right now, we have been able to add to the known corpus of objects. This is just in the effort over the last 4 or 5 years, over 500 pieces, Alex.
Oh, wow.
That have never been recorded.
And I would add too, so the Museum of the American Indian at the Smithsonian has an amazing collection, and they have quite a bit of a lot of things, including preserved wood. But the National Museum of Natural History also has a large collection, and they just recently produced a catalog of their collection. So that's also, you probably are aware of that. Hey, there you are, Kent, we see you. But they also have a pretty substantial collection as well.
So Kent, these items here, the ones with the numbers under them, they're made of flint, correct?
Yes, these are flint.
And they are symbolic of like weapons, but these are not weapons, obviously, right?
They belong to a group of objects that we give the rarefied academic term sociotechnic, which means they represent a weapon, but they would never be used as a weapon, because if you hit someone in the head with that, not only would you do the individual end, you'd shatter and smash these weapons apiece.
Would these have been?
Think of the Queen of England's scepter. That's a war club, but of course it would never be used as something like that. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I was going to ask. These would be carried like a scepter, like a symbol of power.
Exactly.
Which at Moundville we have usually like the ceremonial axes that serve that purpose.
And when you read the catalog, which I might add will be out December the 11th, you will find out what these actually meant. Okay. But I'm not going to tell you. You got to buy the book.
And Kent, correct me, but also Spiro produced a tremendous number of carved conch shells, right?
Oh, I'm getting there.
Okay.
You see 2 of them right here. And these are the interior spirals in a well. Those were worn around the neck. How about these, folks? It's a single piece of stone.
Wow.
Now look, Lindsay, see those teeth?
Yes.
Okay. It reminds me of something from Game of Thrones where they name their weapons. This one I call leg biter. But these are all sociotechnic also. All these are stone. We've got over 6 axes that were carved from a single piece of stone. Now, let me add this, that a lot of the materials in the hollow chamber, in the Spirit Lodge, weren't made at Spiro. They were probably imported from the central Mississippi Valley, particularly Cahokia, all the Braden style material. Remember, I showed you two styles, Braden and Craig. Almost all the Braden style comes from the area around Cahokia. Copper. You see this piece right here? This, it dwells in the Ohio Natural History Museum. You talk about pieces being scattered. This piece, that big. These are copper feathers.
So I will point out again that not only are these pieces spectacular works of art, but they also provide us rare glimpses into how these people looked, as far as how they dressed, what sort of head ornaments they wore. And you can see I see the Fort Die, motif over that character's, that human's eye, which presumably would have been painted on or something. So, we even have some glimpses into how they painted themselves.
Now, here you go, Alex. You can't find them this big in the Gulf anymore. They've all been fished out, but those delicate hands are mine. These are absolutely exquisite. You can see the engraving. This is Braden style, but do you see the entwined serpents?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are those serpents with birds' heads?
Yes. In fact, they should be properly referred to as snake birds. That's the terminology that we use. Now, this is Braden. That's Craig. Do you see the difference? Look carefully. It doesn't seem to be quite as technically well produced.
Not as detailed.
Not as detailed.
And it seems to be a little more geometric too, especially, like the spider motif on the left, and more straight lines and less curves.
And this is Grandmother Spider, who's an avatar of Old Woman Who Never Dies, okay? And she wove the cosmos into existence in that story. And you can see the circle and cross, which is all over the Southeast. That's the warp and the woof of her weaving the cosmos into existence. Here we've got an individual. And remember, I talked about that interior swirl being worn as an object?
Yes. And let me just mention that Dr. Reilly has mentioned several times, he's referred to stories. And so I just want to make our viewers aware that this is an important part of exhibit development for interpreting past civilizations, and it's a huge part of developing the exhibits at Moundville and at Spiro is looking at these symbols, this iconography, and making sense out of it by referring to the stories that were passed down in oral tradition.
This is the famous Birdman or Falcon Dancer. This is also from inside the hollow chamber. And let me just tell you, Alex, this will interest you. The carved shells all come from the western side of the hollow chamber, all to the west. Okay. And Bill?
Yes.
This is a motif that you find in the Southwest. It means a cloud. And we think there were really close connections with the Southwest and spiral. We've got snake birds that also are part panther. But let me ask you something. Do you see the teeth?
Yes.
Do those look like panther teeth to you?
No, I don't see fangs or sharp teeth.
These are your teeth. These are human teeth. These are transformation figures, shamanic transformation figures. And once again, in the middle, the circle and the cross.
Yeah, and since you point out the circle and cross, I'll tell our viewers that, you know, some of these symbols are extremely common all across the southeastern United States, and even further into the Southwest and such, like the circle and cross. And then within the regions, we see differences. So there were some ideas that were very widespread, and maybe universal. And then there were some beliefs that were very specific to certain regions.
Now, this is a reproduction of this. This is used by the Florida tribe of the Eastern Creeks. This is a Dan Townsend, okay? You were talking about him earlier.
Yes.
All right, this is what iconography does. If you look closely at Mother Serpent here, she's a horned serpent. Notice that her forked tongue actually makes a split in her back, and out of the back emerges the twins. Okay, and they're from the realm of the dead, with their tongues sticking out. And by the way, in Choctaw, in a dictionary that was put together in the early 1850s, there was a word for a horned rattlesnake, a horned raccoon rattlesnake. See his raccoon markings? And that's suacinthe. The Choctaw don't even use that word today, but we know it existed because of the dictionary work. And this is what research does for you, particularly into ethnology. Something that I suspect should be happening, talking to all the Native Americans who are taking part in the festival. Here's some of the gorgets that were worn around the neck, also shell. Here's another. Dancers on either side of a wrapped center pole with a dance fan attached. And I just wanted to put this in for Alex and for Bill and for anyone who's interested. This is a little technique that I invented and I use in order to make sense out of these. You see, if you cut them out and fold them up, what you get, you see that they're dancers. And that the edge of the shell is the dance circle. And in the center is the axis mundi, the axis pole. So this is something I teach my students, how to do this.
And they're holding like hand drums?
They're using dance fans.
Dance fans, okay.
Wonderful.
Dr. Reilly, just want to let you know we have about 5 minutes left.
Yes. Wonderful boxes. Different that were dyed, the reeds were dyed that they were made of. All these contain sacred things. Here's one that hasn't been preserved, but it had a bear tooth headdress in it. Now, I have to show you this. Copper axe heads with woodpecker wooden handles, also from the central or chamber or the spirit lodge. Eat your heart out. Isn't that beautiful?
It is.
Just stunning. The eye displayed by mother of pearl. Wooden figures. Turtle rattles, wooden deer masks, and morning star. Okay, a very famous figure, which is known as a seated warrior figure. He was placed right in what would have been the entrance. And here is my favorite pipe. This is the grizzly man, or chief of the giants. He's the Lord of the Pleiades. Now, the Lord of the Pleiades in Osage, his name is he who holds a deer head in his left hand. This comes to the spirit lodge. Do you see the deer head in his left hand?
Yes.
So that's a deity we actually know the name of. All this is going to be in the exhibit. Now, before, I just want to mention Alex, that's where your rattlesnake disc is going to go in the exhibit. But it'll be the first time this has been displayed, as far as we know. It's in the Field Museum. It's the Pawnee Star Chart.
Is that on deer skin?
Deer skin, and it probably was originally produced around the year 400. This is like old gospel books has probably been copied and copied and copied. These constellations, this is the Pleiades, much larger. Pardon me. This is Corona Borealis. See its shape? Everybody notice that? You're going to see something else in a second. Here it is. This is the accurate, this is what it would look like in the sky, but I must have lost it. I can't. Anyway, the floor, this is the floor of the hollow chamber. These are some of the things that were on the floor. We have the Milky Way laid out on the floor. Earth Mother and the Raptor that I showed you earlier. First Man is on the east side. Here's the positioning of some of the objects. And literally, it represents the night sky on, hold on, I can't remember the date. I'm gotten so senile in my old age. It's the dawn on August 25th, which even to this day is a Pawnee date of creation.
Wow. So you're saying
Yes.
that astronomers have pinpointed that this star chart depicts that date.
That date. Now, at first they didn't realize because everything's out of shape and so forth. But when some of the computer labs in New Jersey ran these through and came up with August 25th. Okay. Now, probably about 660. Okay. Now, what's really fascinating is, do you know what the Maya day of creation is?
Is it close to that date?
August the 11th.
Wow.
So I'll stop with that. Come see the show. It's going to be in Birmingham. Moundville's loaning some pieces, and hopefully it's going to all work out that we're going to load visitors on buses and bring them to Moundville from Birmingham.
Yes,
absolutely.
Please do. Thank you, Kent. That concludes this portion of our Native American Festival. We hope for everyone watching that you will join us every day this week at 9, 11, 1 p.m., 6 p.m., and 7 p.m. To purchase our exclusive content and participate in the 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. live streams, and to purchase items from our festival gift shop, which includes our great annual festival t-shirt. You can go to festival.museums.ua.edu. For more information on Mountville Archaeological Park itself, you can go to mountville.museums.ua.edu. And if you're enjoying our festival so far, first day wraps up with this session, and would like to support us, please consider becoming a member of our UA Museums family, and give at, and you can go to the website at give.ua.edu/museums. Thanks to everyone who watched us live, and all those of you who will watch us in the future in a recorded session. We'll see you next time, which is tomorrow morning.
And my thanks to Eric Singleton.
And our thanks to you, Kent Reilly.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Reilly.
Y'all stay on, don't go away.